All right, so for today, you were to get your Android Studio stuff connected to your GitHub account, so you'll be able to submit stuff. Now I want to start talking about how MVC works with Android Studio. We've talked a little bit about MVC, this design pattern, just to see how it is accomplished. So one of the things we want to try to do today is we want to set our label, our text view, programmatically to say a different word. Like right now we have it, so when it's launching, we have it saying woot, right? Okay, that's the hard-coded value. It says woot. And so what I want to do here is I'm going to click on, let's see, I want to go to just the design. There we go. All right, so I have this text view here. And by default, this text view is unnamed. And I want to give this guy a name. All right. So we can think of, remember, so the goal of MVC is to say, let's keep your user interface and your controller, the logic behind it, in two separate places. We haven't really talked about the data portion of it yet, so let's just leave that out of the conversation for this moment. But right now we have a back end, which is our controller, the Java code that's going to drive this interface. And then we have our front end, the user interface that we're looking at here. So I put a text view in here and I just hard coded to say woot right now. But if we want to be able to access this text view from within the code, I have to have some way of connecting those two sides, because this is the interface, the other side is the controller, and I need to have a way for those two to talk to each other, since MVC says we should keep them separate for organizational purposes. Okay, so the way we do that is we effectively have to give a variable name to this text view. And we do that by selecting the text view, and then over here under attributes up top, we have an ID. So I'm gonna name this guy my TV for my text view. All right, so now he has a name. All right, so now that I've named him over here, I can now reference him over in code. Let me hide this guy. So I'm going to go over here to my main activity.java. And inside of onCreate here, I'm going to create a variable of type text view. So I'm going to create a text view. And I'll name this guy my TV. I can name it whatever I want, but it's going to be a variable named my TV. And I want to associate this guy with the text view that we are that we have in our code. So I'm going to say this dot. Now, who is this in this context? When I say this, remember, this is how a variable refers to itself from within itself. So this is an instance of main activity. That's who that is. And main activity is an app.compat activity, which is an activity. It's a controller behind an Android interface. So I'm going to say this dot find view by ID. So I'm going to ask this particular activity to go and search his user interface, in this case, for a specific view given its ID. And that's going to be r.id.myTV. Now, this is ultimately going to boil down to just some integer. So there's some unique random integer that got associated with my view named my TV. I don't want to have to memorize some crazy sounding integer. If I hover over this, it might even tell me what that integer is. Yeah, it's 1000178. So I could put 1000178 in here if I wanted to, but that's fairly meaningless to a person, right? But my TV means something. Now, just to explain what's going on here a little bit, it's hidden from us in here, but if I go to the generated Java, it's not in the generated Java. Let's see, where does that dude live? It's not something you will mess with. Or can we not see it anymore? Well, maybe it doesn't give us a way to see it anymore. It seems like maybe this Java folder here, I bet you if I right click and I say reveal in Finder, well, they hide it from us. That's okay. So this guy with a capital letter, typically if we see something that starts with a capital letter, what is that? What kind of animal is that thing likely? Like the character class had a capital C, driver has a capital D. This guy has a capital R. So this is probably the name of some class by naming convention. So this R class is the resource class, and Android Studio maintains this for us. It's nothing that we ever directly interface with. But when I was over on the user interface and I named my text view my TV, it went ahead and automatically put an entry into the R file, the R class file for that my TV and associate it with a random integer or whatever. So under the hood, through that R file is how MVC is accomplished in Android Studio. All right. It allows us to, from within code, associate variables with things that exist in our user interface. So I want to ask this activity to find a specific view given that view's ID. What is his ID? Well, I'll ask my R file. I'll ask him for his collection of IDs. And I'm going to say, oh, I want the one called my TV. And what I have highlighted there will just boil down to some integer that is the unique identifier for that text view that we created. All right. So now I can say my TV.setText equal to hello world. For example, I can programmatically change the text on that text view. So we see here in our design, it currently says woot. So if I come in here and I just comment that out for a second and I run this application, we're going to go ahead and see that it'll relaunch here in a second. It'll say woot. Okay, so there's my woot. So now I'll come back in here and I'll uncomment that line where I will programmatically set the text of that text view, proving that we can make changes to things in our user interface from our code. So we'll go ahead and start that guy again. And now it'll launch and we'll see it say hello world. All right, that makes some sense. Now, maybe we would like to, so now we're going to finish the loop, right? We're going to say, well, you know what? I don't want it to just automatically become hello world. I want it to maybe become hello world when we like click a button, something like that. So I want it to show up and say woot it first. And then I click some button and then it'll say hello world as a response to me clicking something. All right. So we'll come out here to our user interface and we'll go ahead and drop a button in here. All right. Now we actually don't need to give this button an ID. We could, if we gave this button an ID, I could then change the text on the button or something like that during runtime or move it around on the screen or something. But in this case, I don't care about the button itself. What I care about is what happens when that button is clicked. Okay. I'll just change the text on this button real quick. So instead of it just saying button, it'll say like press me. Something like that. All right. So all I've done is created a button on here. I haven't done anything else. Now we're going to go back to code. And what we're going to do is we're going to write a function that we would like to get called when this button is clicked. All right. Makes sense? So I'll come back in here to code. I'm going to write another function here, this guy, and it has to follow this pattern. You can name the function whatever you want, but it must be public. It must be void. You can call it whatever it, let's see, let's call it on press me button clicked. You can name it whatever you want. We're going to name that guy Elephant if we wanted to. It has to take a view as a parameter. You can name that view whatever you want. All right. So we might say that this method signature must be like this. You can change the name of the method. You can change the name of the variable, V in this case. So it doesn't have to be called V. We can have that guy called LOL or something like that, but it must be a view. All right. So V represents the view that ultimately called this function. And I'll show you what that means here in a few minutes. I would say that pretty commonly, we won't use that variable. But if you did want to know who happened to call this function, maybe you have 5 different buttons that all call that same central function. You might want to know which of those 5 buttons was clicked to give you that central function, right? You might want to know maybe it's a calculator or something like that. You might want to know, well, was it the 0 button or the 1 button or the 2 button? Which button was ultimately clicked that called this guy? All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my text from up here into here. So when this function is called, however it ultimately gets called, I want to go ahead and I want to grab my text view, and then I'm going to set the text to hello world, but only when this function is called. All right, so now what I need to do, so I've created a function here in my activity, and I've used a very specific signature. Must be public, must be void, must take a view as a parameter. And by following that signature, I have now made that guy noticeable on the interface side. And we'll see that here in a second. So when I go back over to our interface and I click on the button's going to have an attribute called onClick right here. And you notice, so this is my button here, and he has an attribute called onClick. If I hit this drop down, see how he now notices my on press me button clicked. He only became aware of that because I wrote a function that matched that signature. So now when I click this button on click, what should it do? It should call that function. Make sense? So if we go back to our code here, notice I'm no longer inside of onCreate, just changing the text, never kind of wasting our time with that woot comment. Yeah, I'm now going to boot up and it's going to show woot. And only when I click my button, whose onClick attribute calls this function, will I change it to hello world. Okay. So we'll go ahead and run this guy. Now notice I've been calling, so actually this is very related to what I was about to say. Notice I've been clicking this button right here, which says restart with a little A on it. So it's like an extra fast way of restarting it. But see how it screamed at me down here? It said, look, you added or renamed a resource. So you actually do need to restart the application. You can't do like the quick reset. So we'll click the little one that has the stop sign on it too. All right, so now that restarted it, taking in those changes. All right, so my application launched. It currently says woot. If I click press me, it now says hello world. Make sense? So I have an interactive application now. All right, questions about that? Nope. Which one? This side? Okay. This function has to follow that signature, otherwise my XML won't notice it. On press me, where? This on press me button clicked. This is the name of this function. I could have named this guy LOL if I wanted to. If I name it LOL, I come back over here. I'll go to his on click button, go to his on click, and now I have a function here called LOL. Yep. Yeah, it recognizes it based on the signature, not its name. Yep, so I can name it whatever I want. And you'll see this guy still works now with my LOL function, because it wasn't the name of the function that dictated anything. It was the fact that this function was public, it was void, and it took a view as a parameter. All right, I'm going to go ahead and change it back to that on press me button click. I think it makes a little bit more sense what this guy's supposed to be doing. All right, so I'll change it there. So then I need to go back over to my interface and update it over here. So now call the on press me button clicked. And now I'm going to show you what that V variable is for. Not that you'll necessarily use it very often, but when I click this button, press me, what he's going to do is he's going to call this function over here, and he's going to pass himself in as this view. So I can go ahead and say button B is equal to, let's see, I need to. Button B is equal to the button version of V. I just happen to know that V, which anything that's a view is anything we can see on the screen. Text views are views. Buttons are views. All those things are views. I just happen to know, because I'm the one who hooked these up, that in this particular case, my generic view V is actually something a little bit more than a generic view. It's actually a button. And we can even prove that to ourselves here. Instead of setting it to hello world, I can set it to v dot, was it get class? Just v dot class name. Get class dot toString. So now I'll set the my text view equal to whatever V actually is, the string version of his class name, which should be a button. Go ahead and run this guy again. And we see he is actually an Android material button. So he's actually a very special kind of button, a material button. All right. But we're going to treat him like a plain Jane generic button. So I'll switch this guy back. So that just kind of proved what V actually was in this particular case. So I'll go ahead and grab V into a variable of type button so I can conveniently mess with it. And I'll say B dot, is it set text to, let's just say thanks. How about thanks for clicking? Something like that. Go ahead and run this guy. So now it says press me, click it, changed it to hello world, but then I updated the button to thanks for clicking. So proving that when you have the on click setting for a view, in this case a button, he will send himself in, a pointer to himself into that function, so that if we did want to do something with it, we could. That makes some sense? All right, so all we're doing here is we're looking at that back and forth of MVC. How do I make things on the code side, manipulate things on the interface side? How do I make things on the interface side see things on the code side? All right. So questions about that? All right, well, we're going to start off now. So we're going to take our some of our background we've learned from the last couple of classes, and we are going to start writing an application called, well, we're going to write a dice roller. And I have a backstory to this dice roller thing, which hopefully will start getting some of your creative juices flowing related to this. When I first came to Concordia in 2006, I don't do it anymore, but I used to be a big tabletop Dungeons and Dragons player. So if you have the real dice, you know, you roll the dice and all that stuff. And like, oh, I had the cool stuff. I had like the thing you put around your neck with the dice. I had dice made of asteroid. Did I tell you about this before? The asteroid dice? I had dice that was made out of an asteroid. Like super heavy. I used to be one of the dungeon masters at a conference called Origins years and years and years ago. And they gave all the dungeon masters the asteroid dice, you know, because it makes you cool. And they're like little tiny, like the D20 for a 20-sided die for the asteroids, this little tiny thing, and it weighed like as much as like a, I don't know, like maybe a golf ball or something like that. Like it was heavier than it looked like it should have been, you know, because it was made of an asteroid, obviously. So in any case, we had just moved up here from Macomb, Illinois, and we hadn't unpacked any of our boxes or anything like that. And so my dice were somewhere in there, and there were some students here that wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. Well, I'll play Dungeons and Dragons with you. And so this was very shortly before so this is after Apple had announced that the App Store was going to be a thing. A lot of us take for granted that apps have always been on our smartphones. Year one of iPhone did not have third-party apps. Year one of iPhone just had whatever Apple installed on there. So year two, they announced this app store. So developers like me could say, oh, I want to write some apps and have them on the app store day one. Now we can all look back now and say, well, the app stores on their smartphones have become pretty popular, right? People just assume they're there. Well, I'll tell you what, day one, everybody and their brother downloaded every single app on the app store. Okay. I wrote a dice roller. So I decided that, you know, I wrote 4 applications that were on the App Store the day it went live. And so one of them, when I was teaching myself the Objective-C language, which is what iPhone applications are written in, so very similar approach to what we're doing here. You build your interface, you connect it to your it's called a view controller. A view controller in iOS is like an activity here, same kind of thing. So I had to learn that ecosystem because I hadn't written software in for iOS before, because nobody really had, unless you worked at Apple. So I decided, oh, I'm going to write a dice roller. And I just want to see if I can bring up the user interface. D20 gaming dice. I think it's under Litman XP. Yeah, here it is. All right. Beautiful user interface, right? Okay, first of all, can we all agree that I've proven the truth of that by putting my name in there with that thing? Okay, so amazing user interface. This was live on the App Store. This was my normal version. I also had a pro version of that let you do like 2d6 plus 3d8 plus 4. You know, it's like have your maybe your broadsword weapon attack or something like that, and you could say, oh, it was awesome. Okay, so obviously a beautiful user interface. Punchline, Apple about, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago, kicked this off the store because it didn't meet their user interface standards. Big surprise, right? Okay, but this was out day one of the Apple App Store. Now, just what we've learned today, all of us have now learned enough that we can write some pretty, let's call it ghetto kind of Android apps now, right? we're going to keep building on that. And really what I've shown you so far isn't substantially less complicated than this, right? We got some buttons, we got a big old text view. I also had this for Android, but the story isn't as good on the Android side. So this is like a big text view. This is this is a text view. This is a bigger font text view. These are just all buttons. This is a text view. This is a text view. This is a button. This is a button. All right. So all we've done today is mess with text views and buttons. This is just more text views and more buttons. And it was on the App Store the day the store went live. How much do you think this app made, money-wise? Huh? Go up. Now, made $3 million for 10 hours of work. Now, if I release this app on the App Store today, presuming that Apple approved my junky user interface, what would it make today? If I was lucky, it would make $10. Probably nothing, but because there's a zillion dice rollers out there now. But punchline is this. Obviously, the app isn't worth that much. This had everything to do with right time, right place. It was on the App Store. I probably had 90-year-old grandmothers who were just downloading it because they saw every app and said, oh, it's 99 cents. I'll download that. Pro version was $1.99. Great value. Great value. Then I also had the first two real-time stock quote applications on the App Store that I was screen scraping off of Google Finance back then. So if you wanted like the current price of Apple, I would hit the Google Finance thing, pull the ticker out for the value and put it on the screen. I would just keep pulsing that like every 2 seconds for real time. Oh man, that killed your battery too. It was terrible. Okay. but in any case, that did pretty well as well. So in any case, the idea here is that these are actually some of my other apps. This was like an app I made for like kids learning things. This was a cryptocurrency thing way back before Bitcoin was actually, or like all these new crypto things were good. But in any case, part of our partnership, you maybe heard me mention it last semester, is I tried to get students involved in this thing called CU Launch. So CU Launch is an entrepreneurial competition every year that the business school, Dr. Dan Sem, the dean of the business school, puts on. They teach you how to build business models, and you kind of have this cardboard thing you set up. They give you a free book, and the idea is like, as a entrepreneur, somebody who kind of comes up with an idea for something and you want to try to build a business around it, they teach you those skills. Well, as computer programmers, we're like ninjas. We have this superpower where we can invent without having to go and build a physical product, right? We can write code to make these products. So if you sit down and you say, oh, you know what, I really want to make an app that solves some problem. Like in this case, I'm going to write a dice roller. When I wrote this, I had no intention of selling it or anything like that, right? I just said, I need a dice roller. I'm going to go ahead and write a dice roller. I need an excuse to learn the iOS stuff anyways. And it just happened to work out. Now, if you were writing apps and putting on the Android store, the iOS store today, when it's no longer cool, no longer new, it's just expected to be there, you're obviously not going to make as much from a single app, or probably not going to make as much from a single app. But what if you released an app a month and each one of those apps made $100 a month? You're doing pretty well by the end of a year, aren't you? In terms of just extra income from something you were just dabbling with. So in any case, hopefully this kind of gets your creative juices going, where you can use these skills you're learning for computer programming. And now that you have a way of, through Android or similarly through iOS, you can get it up on their app stores once you have something interesting. But we see here, at least in the early days, what I build here is not overly more pretty than what we just wrote in class, right? This isn't impressing anybody, but everybody bought it because they bought all 40 some apps that were on the App Store day one. So in any case, kind of take that to heart from the perspective of it's worthwhile exploring things outside the classroom, not just doing the homework assignments and things like that. If you come up with a good idea and you want to work on some project, either solo or with some classmates, it's worth doing those things. Never know. You might make a bunch of money. Worst case is it'll be a seminar. You'll learn something just from investing your time. And hopefully that then translates into whatever you want to measure success by, which shouldn't only just be dollars, but whatever you want to measure success by in the future. All right. So what we want to do is we're going to practice our interface building from what we talked about last time. And we want to ultimately, we're going to build this application as our starting point. Okay. So we want to start building our user interface here. And what I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to create a new project. We'll just start this from scratch for a dice roller. All right, so I'll close this. We're going to create a new project. We're going to use an empty activity. We're going to call this guy CSC250 Spring 2021 Dice Roller. All right. And it's going to be Java language. We'll put it in the same API as we did before. We'll go ahead and hit finish. So initially, this is just going to be a plain Jane hello world application. All right. And it's, I can go ahead and run this and we'll see it starts off as just hello world. All right, so there's our hello world. I'll go into the user interface thing, and just like last time, I'm going to right click on where it says constraint layout, because I'm terrible at interface design. So I'm going to show you again, we're going to do the linear layout stuff. So I'm going to convert this view into a linear layout. And then I'm going to click on that linear layout, and I'm going to change its orientation to be vertical. We are going to try to mimic this user interface here. All right, that is, we're going to have some wide text view. These are like the individual dice rolls. So I rolled 4 6-sided die. The first time I got a 2, then I got a 5, then I got a 4, then I got a 2. Okay, so this top thing here is going to show you all the individual rolls you had. Then this guy is going to show the sum, the total you rolled. Okay, then we have kind of a calculator-y thing over here. And then we have the actual dice thing over here. This guy is its own label. This guy is his own text view. This guy is his own text view. All right, and then we have a couple of buttons. So what is this guy? This whole thing is a vertical linear layout, where the top thing in there is this text view. Then next is this text view with much bigger font. Okay. Then I have a vertical linear layout and a vertical linear layout sitting inside of a horizontal linear layout. I have 2 collections right next to each other. So I'll add a horizontal linear layout, and inside that I'll put a vertical linear layout and another vertical linear layout. In this left vertical linear layout, I'll put a horizontal linear layout. I'll put 3 buttons in there. Then I'll put another horizontal linear layout, put 3 buttons in there. Then I'll put another horizontal linear layout, put 3 buttons in there. Then I'll create another horizontal linear layout. I'll put 1 button in there, and I'll put another button in there. And that second button, we're going to set to stretch out a little bit. So it's a little bit bigger button, just because I wanted the clear button to look different for no good reason. In this other vertical linear layout, we'll put a horizontal linear layout, put 2 buttons in there. Another horizontal linear layout, put 2 buttons in there. Another horizontal linear layout, put 2 buttons in there. Now over here on that left side linear layout, we'll put another horizontal linear layout, put 2 labels, 2 text views in there. They're called UI labels on iPhone. They're called text views on Android. All right. So now we've finished with that particular horizontal linear layout. And we'll go ahead and add another horizontal linear layout onto the original vertical linear layout, and then put 2 buttons in there and set the gravity to left. Make some sense? So that's effectively how this interface was built. So we'll go ahead and start building this today, but your homework for, let's see, can I copy the, let me just save that image first. Copy. If I click on this, does it open? Look, release date, more evidence. July 16th, 2008. I think you'll find that is the day the iPhone, the iPhone 3G came out. Vastly improved random number generation. Oh, I forgot about the sound effects. That was awesome. Sounded like real dice rolling. That was great. All right, but I want to have the now. No, because I said like 6-7 years ago they kicked it off the store, so they didn't meet their user interface requirements. They want their apps to look good now, apparently. See, back then that was in the day that they had like the apps that made fart noises. Now in Apple's, well, at least as of several years ago, Apple's like terms of service for writing apps on the App Store, because they have this whole thing, because it's very arbitrary how they like judge your app and whether it's allowed on the App Store. They put in something like, actually in there was something, we don't need any more fart apps, I think was like in the verbiage of their like this official document. So kind of funny. All right, so I'll upload this picture. This is the user interface or something like it that we're trying to mimic. So I'm going to just start building this. But our next homework assignment, build an Android user interface that looks similar to below. Submit the GitHub link and the self eval. Look at that awesomeness. So good. All right. Let's go back over here. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this text view initially. So like I said before, we have our large vertical linear layout. We're going to go ahead and put a couple of text views in there, and we'll even try to make these match up a little bit. So I'll click on text, I'll drag a text view in there, and we'll actually mimic this. This was 2542. Where's my text? All right, we can change the color and stuff if we wanted to, but we don't have to mess with the color right now. Then I'll go ahead and I'll put another text view in here. And I'll give this guy a much bigger font. Set it to 36 right now, and that should be a 13. And I had that guy kind of centered, so we'll set his gravity to center. All right, so there's our 13. What comes next? I have a vertical linear, well, I have a horizontal linear layout that's going to hold 2 vertical linear layouts. So I'll go to my layouts. I'll drop in a horizontal linear layout. And then inside that, I'm going to put 2 vertical linear layouts. Sometimes the easiest way to do that is going to be to drop it down here. So I'll put a vertical linear, oh, did I get it? I got it. I'll put a vertical linear layout, and then I'll put another vertical linear layout. In that left vertical linear layout, we're going to put a horizontal linear layout with a button for 7, 8, 9. All right. Now, what we want to do is we want these guys, so notice we have all these warnings where it's talking about the hover over it. Well, it doesn't like the hard-coded string there, but for this guy, I don't think it likes the layout, but it's just a warning. It'll still work. So this guy's width for that horizontal is to match the parent, but we want the width of the vertical, the 2 vertical ones. We could choose match parent and then set the, I think the weight would be 0.5. So there's a 50. Kind of unimportant, I guess, for right now. I'm going to set the layout width to wrap content for both of these guys. All right, so both of them are set to wrap content. So then we'll go ahead and put a horizontal linear layout in this first one. And I'll put a couple of buttons in there. Button, button, button. I really thought it was a 0.5. Maybe once I have stuff on the other side, it'll work. Similarly, I can put another horizontal linear layout over on this side. And I can put some buttons in there if I wanted. Maybe I just have 2 buttons on that one. And maybe this guy, his text says something like a D4. And this guy's text is something like a D6. And this guy was what, 7, 8, 9? So this is a 7. This is an 8. This is a 9, something like that. All right, so now we're kind of building a user interface along the lines of this guy. Doesn't have to look identical. You can certainly go through there and find ways of changing the color, adding images to buttons and things like that. But, you know, just start playing around with this interface for building a linear layout based user interface. All right, makes sense what I'm asking you to do? All right, so build a user interface. You don't have to make it work. So for Friday, make it look like this-ish. All right, I'll actually, just for the video here, I'll go ahead and import this into version control just so you can see that again. So I'll share a project on GitHub. We're going to call it the CSC250 dice roller dealy flippy thingamajiggy. So I'll hit share. That all pops up. I'll say add. And it's up there. So there's that project up on GitHub now. All right, so I'll paste that in there with the, I'll say like this guy. All right, questions, comments, concerns, bribes. All right, I will see everybody on Friday. And again, I'm not judging this on beauty. Just create kind of a functional-ish user interface. If you want to go hog wild with it, great. I'll show it off to the class if it's something amazing looking, but I'm not going to you're not going to lose points if you have just a whole bunch of generic crap buttons. It's fine. You were having GitHub issues, right?
I failed to, I pressed that